School bus in Middletown, Rhode Island might never be the same again. A voluntary test program slated to get underway at the Aquidneck Elementary School tracks not only the bus location, but where kids get on or off. The system uses radio frequency ID tags that are attached to a student's book bag.
So we're going to talk about ways in which we can defend ourselves against governments spying on us.
That privacy is dead. This is something that really concerns me about my generation, especially when we talk about how we're not surprised by anything. I think that we should consider that when we lose privacy, we lose agency, we lose liberty itself, because we no longer feel free to express what we think.
This is what's happening. The EPA is flying overhead, spying basically on farmers and ranchers. They say they're doing, regulation and checking to make sure.
It's the idea that you use drones that's used to catch the terrorists in Asia and in the Middle East to fly over the United States to spy on people is one of the great invasions of privacy, whether they do it for farmers or they do it for anything else. They're doing it now to help some police forces supposedly checking on criminals. These things can intercept cell phone calls, text messages. These are nothing more than spy planes.
One of the things that we were able to do with the Smart TV platform was actually abuse the browser to the extent that we could actually gain access to the camera that's built into the TV.
Right.
And so what we can prove here is that with a little bit of extra code, we can turn the camera on in your browser.
Wow.
And while this is evident to you right here because we've designed it that way, this is something that we can do invisibly and actually have the camera running behind the web page that you're looking at.
All these cell phone towers, the power grid, they probably have supercomputers hooked up to the power grid that can throw up red flags if, people start talking about storing up on food or they, anti-government comments. In other words, the NSA, let's say there's 20,000 employees at the NSA. Well, they can't monitor 150 million television sets. You understand? But basically what happens is they've got massive underground database facilities. The NSA is building the country's biggest spy center. Well, if we know about this, then they've got something 10 times greater.
The feature is called Smart Interactivity, and it's already turned on as a default setting for millions of people who have purchased these devices. Viewers are able to turn the setting off, that is, if you even know that it exists.
But you can see right there, there's the pinhole for the camera. So everything's black, so very, very small USB charger right there. Should be
The microchip that's been embedded under your skin by the team, an Argentinian soccer team, planning experimentally to this point to offer supporters a chance to implant a microchip in their skin. Lets them walk right through, like Easy Pass in your car.
Easy Pass.
Just walk right into the stadium.
But the Easy Pass is in your car, not in your wrist.
Yeah.
I'm not really thinking about it in terms of sports.
And developing tonight, the U.S. government has been using spy drones for non-military purposes on U.S. soil. That's according to a new report. The Pentagon has done this for more than a decade.
You got a look at the new statue from the Satanic Temple there today.
Yeah, Jessica, that's right. Good evening. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas and like Hanukkah here at the state capitol, and now like, well, winter solstice, I suppose. We have some video of the new decorations that are here at the Capitol. It was last week during the hustle and bustle of veto session when all of these holiday decorations started going up, mostly behind the scenes. Folks were busy walking through and some didn't stop to take notice. Well, it was earlier this week when we saw a new addition. There's the manger scene with baby Jesus and there's the candlesticks and the menorah for Hanukkah. Both of those put up by religious groups. Well, those groups not too thrilled with this latest installment, a statue from the Satanic Temple of Chicago.
Illegal, ineffective, and unnecessary. That is essentially what the 5-member Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board said about the National Security Agency's collection of phone data from millions of Americans. Jim Dempsey, a member of the government-appointed board, voted for the blistering report.
They're collecting your communications.
Ever since Edward Snowden leaked information about the NSA program, the White House has been on defense, calling it a critical tool for tracking terrorists.
We cannot unilaterally disarm our intelligence agencies.
For the most part, courts have so far supported the administration, but the report says the program infringes on basic privacy.
When you call grandma in Nebraska, the NSA knows. This is a wide, indiscriminate net. They're not even looking for someone specific. When a call is made, Verizon turns over this information: the phone number, phone serial numbers, the location the call comes from, the time of the call, the duration of the call, and all the same information for the person on the other end of the phone, even if they're not a Verizon customer.
There is a data set maintained by government. Basically, that means that for almost everyone who has the ID, for everyone over 18 years old, the government will have your face in the database.
Some worry this technology could lead to serious invasions of privacy and make it easier for authorities to track political dissidents.
Next tonight, into that question I mentioned, is your TV watching and listening to you? New smart TVs with internet connections able to transmit your private conversations.
Alexa, turn on the hall lights.
Okay.
Alexa, lock the door.
Okay.
We heard about algorithms. So what are they watching for? What's the plan? You have a master's in algorithms.
Well, they're watching everything. I mean, the mistake we make is we think of a human and a human's ability to focus their attention, but they're gobbling all that they can. So if they hear a dog barking in the background, you might get a recommendation for dog food. If they hear an argument, they might send you marriage counseling. If they hear kids screaming, or even they can identify the music you're listening to in the background, the TV shows in the background, or maybe they hear a kettle about to boil and they give you a recommendation for tea. It really is a vacuum in terms of its ability to take as much data as possible, identify it in the hopes of then finding stuff they can sell you.
But if you happen to own one of these, a Samsung Smart TV, you may already be victim of unwarranted home surveillance. That's right, according to the company's own privacy policy, the conversations you're having in the confines of your own home may not always be private. The message reads, quote, "Please be aware that if your spoken words include personal or other sensitive information, that information will be among the data captured and transmitted to a third party through your use of voice recognition."
Like Vizio, they recently came under fire when customers realized that the advertising was just getting a little bit too familiar, if you know my drift. Vizio smart TVs were keeping track of what owners watched and then tailored ads to them specifically. And this happens even if you're using an external source like an Amazon Fire or Roku. So Vizio shares information with third-party companies, and it's hard for you to find out where this data goes. And it's not like when you go into the settings that Vizio says, oh, this is third-party marketing. They call it smart interactivity. So if you're looking at your menu, you're like, oh yeah, I want that. I want smart interactivity. We'll tell you how to turn it off.
But these cameras, they're so tiny, you can fit them right in there, and they would just blend right into the light-emitting diode mix, you know, the matrix. You would never know that they were there unless someone told you and showed you with a microscope where they were. But of course, they didn't do that. Of course, they listened to people's outcry. They said they weren't going to do it, and then they said it never existed, and then they didn't talk about it anymore.
Last week, we were all talking about Willow the cat, which had been missing for 5 years, found in New York City. The cat was tracked through a microchip inside her. And that's what our Lionel the News Decoder is talking about this morning. The very simple question he's asking, would you want your child to have this? It's called RFID, radio frequency identification.
Indeed. And then somebody says, well, if it's good enough for my cat, good enough for grandma and grandpa, what about my baby? No more Amber Alerts. Never having to worry about that fear of an abducted child. And then we say, well, you know what? Maybe we should have them. And on that chip, we're going to have everything. Credit cards, driver's license. Think about it. Metro card. Blink. No more wallets. Think about this. You don't carry keys anymore. So the question I want everybody at home to ask is that a good idea? Because that's where we're going next.
New this morning, Delta Airlines will allow travelers to use facial recognition at its terminal here in Atlanta. Travelers will be able to use the facial software to check in as well as while boarding instead of presenting a passport or ID. Delta will officially unveil the feature at gates in Concourse F in October before expanding it to its other terminals by December.
The government here says it is trying to purify society by rewarding those who are trustworthy and punishing those who are not. So like the credit score that most Americans get for how they handle their finances, Chinese citizens are now getting social credit scores.
The America I grew up in and cherished has been murdered by its own federal government. Our Constitution has become meaningless and our laws politicized so badly they are no longer enforced except for political purposes. Our elected officials are, to a person, utterly corrupt and completely devoid of any love or respect for the country which pays.
Fears about the government spying on us used to be limited to dystopian novels of the future. But today, thanks to technology, the government can spy on you in ways you may not have thought of. Did you know it can listen in on your conversations through your toaster or identify you through a street camera and your driver's license photo? Turns out the NSA has pressured manufacturers of security devices, including routers and other networking equipment, to leave certain backdoor vulnerabilities. These are known to the NSA and exploited anytime they take an interest in a person. Internet-connected fridge or other appliance that claims to help you by keeping track of items, letting you know if you're running low on milk, etc. But if the government decides you're suspicious, they can use that same fridge and the items within to spy on you through radio frequency identification. Prism. In addition to worrying about the backdoor on your firewall, you should also worry about a program called Prism, a cloak and dagger internet spying program pet of the NSA. They use it to collect metadata from companies like Google and Apple in bulk. This may include everything from Skype calls to GChat logs. Again, the government can't legally do this to its own citizens, but it can do it if it believes it is monitoring potentially valuable foreign information routed through U.S. servers.
Found it pretty intrusive and kind of creepy.
High-flying drama in Sacramento's Land Park neighborhood tonight as residents are furious over a flying object. The mysterious drone has been spotted during late-night hours looking down on their homes. Good evening, I'm Tony Lopez.
And I'm Christina Janes. Only on CBS 13 we're getting answers on what government agency is flying the aircraft and why.